I was really surprised how normal it felt. Like I kept thinking, it just feels so normal.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast for helping you and your family cruise a little bit smarter. And some ships are sailing. At the time of this recording, the test cruise for the Disney Magic has already happened. So that's exciting. So I am here with Christy instead of Steve today. So we get to have fun playing while Dad is doing his job. So I'll throw it to you, Christy.
Yeah, this is always fun. We get to not have a parent look at us and tell us that we're going down the wrong road. We get to have fun, just the two of us. But I am super excited about this episode. So we have a guest on that was on basically the first Royal Caribbean cruise out of the United States post-pandemic. So, or whatever, in the new era, 2021. And so I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Shannon Ford. She has a fantastic YouTube channel. If you have not checked it out, she does actually some great videos about picking your room at Walt Disney World if you were going to stay in a DVC room, even if you're not staying on as a DVC member, but staying in one of those rooms. She's done a bunch of cruise videos, like the things that she wished she knew about Disney Cruise Line. Just fantastic videos on her YouTube channel, which we will link in the show notes. But welcome today, Shannon.
Hey, thank you for having me. And you actually helped me out with that video. So I thank you for your input.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for the shout out. I really appreciated it.
A lot of our listeners obviously have crossover with DVC and Disney World and Disneyland and Adventures by Disney and all of that. So definitely check out that YouTube channel and learn a bit more about those DVC rooms. We're thinking of buying DVC eventually. So I'll be hopping over to that YouTube channel to learn more myself.
And actually I do have it for every hotel property on Disney property, every Walt Disney World. And then also I did them for all the Disney Cruise Line ships too.
Right. And they are so thorough. It is amazing the work that you have put into those videos.
I'm very analytical, and I will analyze a ship, where everything is and why I want to be at a certain location. So for me, where I'm located on the ship can make or break her trip, which is good and bad. So if you end up in the wrong part of the ship. But yeah, so I wanted to put that in a video, and it's the wish was challenging because we really don't know. I was basically just going off of mock-ups, but hopefully I'm pretty accurate. Time will tell when the ship is finally released.
Seth and I are booked on the Wish, and we are in one of those veranda rooms that's on that little bump out area on the side. And I have a feeling that eventually those are going to be the sought after rooms, because
secret rooms.
Yeah, because you get just a little bit more space. And also, if you look down the side of the ship, when you're pushed back a bit, it feels like maybe you don't get to see as much. But if you're on that bump out, you'll probably get to see more stuff. So we're excited to try out that type of room.
We've been on a bump out on the Navigator, and it was really cool years ago.
And they have the bump out in the front of the ship and the concierge section on the Dream and the Fantasy Now. And so they really are nice. Like that extra balcony space is noticeably larger.
Yes.
And then in terms of a bad room location, so true. We had one room where we had a guaranteed cabin, and we were like the room that butted up to the kids club on the 5th floor.
Oh, wow.
It was so loud. So, and like the crew didn't realize that when they were playing their music to clean the play area at 2 a.m. that it could be heard in the staterooms, even though the staterooms had a really loud white noise machine going, and it would still come through, and the pounding would still come through. So
oh, wow.
Not a room I would pick. or
Yeah.
yeah. Anybody else to pick.
I think that Disney did the right thing by moving the kids club down to the bottom of the ship.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I know that if you've ever taken the what's that tour called where they
the Art of the Theme Show
tour. If you ever take that, they'll be like, the 5th floor is purposefully shorter than the other decks so that the kids feel less scared and they feel like the ceiling is closer to them and whatever. But I'm like, let's put them down in the basement because they're not the ones who need the pretty view of the ocean or all of that stuff during dinner. And to put all of the restaurants down below that level where there aren't windows and stuff just doesn't make sense. So I think it's a good move and I'm excited. It also means for your problem, Christy, less kids next to staterooms. Just those lower staterooms would really have to deal with that.
Right. The kids club noise coming through. Absolutely.
Right,
yeah. And Shannon and I have a child and we don't want the kids club taking up like prime center of the ship.
Absolutely.
Mid-ship location. So.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it easier to drop them off at the kids club or after dinner. If it's closer to where you're eating, it just makes it just more logistically sense.
Yep, I agree. And listen, I love a good open house. I love to go to the kids clubs before as an adult and check out all the weird, cool tech that they have there. So I utilize those kid clubs for like an hour at the beginning of every cruise just to see what I'm missing out on. In fact, I always tell Christy, my dream is to do the Panama Canal cruise just so that I could do the adult, like after hours kids club activities that they offer on those long cruises.
Oh, I didn't know they had those. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, they literally do kids club programming in the kids club, but only for adults. So it's like super sloppy science and like all the things that the kids get to do, but just a bunch of adults doing it. And I'm like, that's literally my brand is adults doing super sloppy science. So I'm very excited one day to experience that. But Steve's going to be like, why are they talking about this? This has nothing to do with the topic. So one of the reasons we wanted you to come onto the show today, as Christy said, is that you were on the first Royal Caribbean cruise out of specifically the US. Yes, because there were cruises out of Nassau before this. And so we're super excited to talk to you about that. But just so that we can give you some street cred, can you tell us a little bit about your Disney history? This could be in the parks or the cruise line or both, just so we can get a sense. I can already see behind you, you have every set of mini ears ever created.
Yeah, I have.
So I have a feeling you've got some pretty cool Disney history, but tell us just a little bit about your experience with Disney.
Well, growing up in South Florida, I started going to Disney. I think my mom said I was 3 months old. You know, that's what she tells me. I don't remember, but, you know, started going to, and at that point, Disney was just Magic Kingdom, you know, give you my age. I was 6 when Epcot came around. So, you know, been going to Disney was just a part of our life. And a lot of time was just getting in the car, going for the day and coming back. I lived about 4 hours away. And then, you know, fast forward to when my husband and I started dating and got married, we would go to the parks and people would always say, you know, you guys are going to Disney again? Like, you don't even have kids. Like, why are you going? So for when it came down to having my son was born in December 2015, and deciding what to do for his first birthday, I didn't want to do a big birthday and spend a lot of money for a 1-year-old that's not going to remember. I wanted something that I was going to remember. So I decided, you know what, I want to do a Disney cruise. Turns out a friend of mine that lives in Canada that I used to work with had moved back home to Canada, was going to be on Walt Disney World the same time right before the cruise. So we're like, well, let's add on 3 nights. And we ended up staying at the Wilderness Cabins because I needed a refrigerator, a kitchen. My son was 1, and I had formula and all the stuff that comes with a 1-year-old. And I had the kitchen, and I was like, oh, this is a game changer, going to Disney World with a kitchen. So I immediately looked into DVC after we came back from that trip, and bought into DVC after that trip. But we did 3 nights at Walt Disney World, and then we did 3-night Disney cruise on the Dream. So my son's first birthday was celebrated at the royal table on the Disney Dream. I have video of them singing and making him a little prince. And it was great. Fast forward, we bought into DVC after that trip, and now regularly go 3 or 4 times a year. And then right before the shutdown, we were on one of the last Disney cruises on the Disney Magic out of Miami. So we were we talked about it so many times between my husband and I, how lucky we were to have gone on that trip, because we felt my son was 4. It was such a magical age. He's Marvel Day at Sea. And that we got that trip in before everything shut down. We felt so, we even still to this day say how lucky we were to get that cruise in.
Yeah. Christy and I were also both on cruises near the end of the right before the shutdown. I was on a Star Wars Day at Sea, and Christy was on a Celebrity. Was it the Edge, Christy?
I was. Yep. Captain Kate.
Oh, Captain Kate. Yes.
Love Captain Kate. I wish Disney would be like, hey, Captain Kate, we have new ships coming. Do you want to
come back?
Do you want to come
she
back?
worked for Disney.
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. No,
that's where she made her start as like in officer training and all of that. Like she was, I think, a first officer or second officer or something, moved up that way before she became a captain.
Well, funny enough, I found the cat on Instagram first before I heard about Captain Kate. So if those of you don't, if those don't know, she has a hairless cat. I think it's Bug Naked is his name, or that's his Instagram name. And you saw pictures of him in, when she's driving the ship, he's there. He's everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like on Disney Cruise Line because we don't really get access to the captains the way that Captain Kate gives us access to Celebrity, but her apartment on the Edge is really nice. I'm like, I wonder if all captains of these ships have really nice rooms. And her apartment's like right off of the bridge so that if anything were to go wrong in the middle of the night, she could just run right into the bridge to help, drive the ship or do what she needs to. So, but it's a beautiful apartment and it has a cat in it that lives on the ship full time. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to remember too, it's a newer ship. So they are thinking about what would people want? What would your captains want who are coming to the helm of these ships now, not like 20 years ago when the Magic went into service. So They have the Wish will probably have their bridge and their captain's quarters be right across the bridge as well. But, I think like historically, the captain's quarters have always been off of the bridge for that very reason.
I think it has to. Yeah. Like if you're about to hit an iceberg, you want your captain right near the bridge. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So you have a lot of Disney cred. That makes it even more interesting to hear about your experience on a non-Disney cruise that happened in 2021, sort of near. It's weird to say the end of the pandemic because I don't really know what that means, but let's call it like post-vaccines being available and cruises starting back up.
I kind of say post-shutdown.
Okay.
That's kind of how I've been post-shutdown because I will never be post-COVID. I have referred to it as post-COVID because that's what comes up in searches. So, but I always have, we'll never be post-COVID in a comment. So yes, I would say post-shutdown.
Okay, so post-shutdown, one of the first cruises and the first cruise that Royal Caribbean did out of the US. Now, for our listeners, we want you to know that Royal Caribbean and Disney are similar in the post-shutdown era because both of these cruise lines have opted to do test cruises instead of the other option the CDC offered, which is it 95% or 100% vaccination?
95%.
95%. So if you require 95% of your passengers to be vaccinated, you don't need to do a test cruise. But Disney cannot require 95% of their passengers because the vaccine is not available for people under the age of 12 right now. And if you're talking about Disney, of course, you're going to have more than 5% of your passengers who didn't have an opportunity for that. So Royal Caribbean also went this route. So that is why I'm extra excited to talk about this and learn a little bit about how it was.
Right. And I know Carnival is not going that route, but what's happening is if you don't register in time, they are actually, I know that there was one person, it was a mom with 2 children, and she didn't realize she had to register and she, right away, when she went to register her kids, they said, we've already hit the 5% capacity, you'll have to cancel. That's the risk of some cruise lines, not going that 95 or going that 95% route is there's a very limited capacity.
And I would tell our listeners that if you are booking one of these cruises this fall, whether you decide to tell the cruise line you're vaccinated or not, they're going to assume you're not vaccinated if you don't tell them. And if you are booked on one of these cruises, be sure to call and have your travel agent call and indicate whether you are vaccinated or not, so that the notes can be determined regardless of the ship that you're on. So let's take us to this cruise. When did you book it even?
So it was announced June 4th. And now to give you a little history about my Royal Caribbean history, this is my, I want to say 18th or 19th cruise total, but this is probably my 15th or 16th Royal Caribbean. I'm not even sure. Royal Caribbean was what we cruised before. I've cruised Celebrity, Princess before, one or two on each. But Royal Caribbean was where we chose to cruise before. I live in South Florida. We did a lot of weekend cruising. That was our vacation of choice before my son was born. And we are diamond status on Royal Caribbean. And then we, have since gone and ventured off to Disney Cruise Line, which I will say is more similar than not. There's obviously differences. There's no characters. There's a lot of differences. But I think, having never cruised on Carnival, so I can't compare that, I think Royal Caribbean is very, very similar in a lot of regards to the way Disney Cruise Line is run. So it's a seamless transition to us. And we have a book now. We had actually, Christy, you booked me on a spring break cruise and it was canceled. So we were supposed to sail on the Allure. So that got moved. We have now rebooked on the Odyssey for next spring break. This got announced. I'm friends with Matt from Royal Caribbean blog, and I'm in a group with him, and he posted about July 2nd, Freedom of the Seas, ... And I just So he said he already booked it. And then within the 24 hours, I was booked. There was a couple people in the group that we were on that decided to go. My husband, it was a holiday weekend. My husband's a police officer. He was unable to get the weekend off because it was such late notice. It was less than 4 weeks. So I said, do you mind if I go without you? And he said, no, go, go. And so I booked it with just my son and I. And my son is 5.5.
So you and a 5.5-year-old on the Freedom of the Seas. So full disclosure, have not been on a Royal Caribbean ship either. I do know, and actually one day would like to go on one of their mega 6,000 passenger ships just to see what that would be like. I don't think I will like it very much, but I'm also I have to try that, right? That's a huge cruising innovation.
I think you will like the ship itself. Mm-hmm. I think that you will like the little neighborhoods. This is my thought as well, because honestly, for the most part, most of the time they've had these mega ships out. I've had this kid, which is horrible to say it that way, but I haven't wanted to do those ships with my son, who still had such an early bedtime, because I wanted to be able to do all the shows and the diving show and all of these different things that exist on the Oasis class ship. So I've been waiting for him to get a little bit older. So I'm actually ready now that he is 8 to start saying, all right, I need to book it. So maybe, Chris, this is going to be another podcast cruise opportunity for us. So
Well,
I'll say there's
go on.
I was going to say there's the Voyager class, which is a little bit smaller than the Freedom class. Then there's the Freedom. Freedom is the first one. The Voyager class was the first one that had that internal promenade, so kind of like the internal mall. And then the Freedom class, I think what came with the Freedom class was the Flow Rider. That was kind of the big thing with the Flow Rider. I believe the Voyager class also has the ice skating. They have the ice skating show and the ice skating. You can ice skate during the cruise. And then there's the Oasis class, and that's the one you're talking about with the boardwalk and the Central Park. So that's the real mega ship. We've been on the Oasis and the Allure, actually, and the Symphony. So we've been on all three. And then the newer one is the Quantum class, I think it is, and that's the Odyssey. And that is smaller than the Oasis class, but it's different features. It's more, I would say it's a little bit more adult. We are booked on that one. That one's going to be interesting to see how we like it with my son. But the Freedom class, this particular ship went through a full amplification and refurb just before the shutdown. And it only had one sailing before it shut down. So it was like a brand new ship. And we had sailed on this ship in 2008. I didn't recognize most of it. Like, it's a different ship. And for me, for a 3 and 4 night cruise, I thought it was great. For someone with a young son, I thought it was fantastic. The kids' Splashaway Bay on this ship, I thought was better than the one on the Symphony of the Seas, which is a bigger ship. I thought it was just so well designed. I couldn't believe what they did. And they added a sports bar. They took out some areas that were useless and they put in areas. They had this huge mini golf area. They still have a mini golf. They just moved it to the sun deck. So they have a mini golf. It's smaller, but I never even saw it. And then they added these huge slides, which we didn't use because my son is too small for them, but they're now on the back of the ship. But they added in a bunch of features, and it was really, really, really well done.
The splash pad actually has the one. I saw some of your live videos while you were on the cruise. It has a little slide for the younger kids as well.
It looks, and actually it's a pretty good size slide. There's actually 2 slides, and one of them is pretty tall. They had that on the Symphony of the Seas, but he was too small for it. But the height requirement for the Splashaway Bay on the ship is 42 inches. Now on Coco Cay, it's 36 inches. I don't know why it's so high on the ship. I think it's a little too high. The slide's not, it's, I think the slides at, Kidani or Jambo House are, less intensive, but I don't know why it's such a high requirement, but they had, for the Splashaway Bay, they put 2 hot tubs right at the entrance. So parents can sit in the hot tub and watch your kids in the splash pad. To me, that's genius.
Right. Super smart planning.
Yes. And then they have a separate area for the little ones. So a little slide for the, I think it was like 0 to 36 months. So they had a little splash area for those that are still in swim diapers. And it had a little slide. So that was really nice, more than just a wading pool. And then right next door, it's also right next door to a bar. Again, as a parent, great.
Did you get the drink package?
I did not. As Diamond, I got 4 free drinks a day.
Right.
And that was more than enough.
Especially because you are parenting. You're the parent.
Yes. Yes. I know. My husband texted me at some point and he goes, "Are you day drinking?" I'm like, "No, I'm parenting."
But even if you have to be the one who is always on when you're the only parent with your child on a cruise ship.
And I will say the staff, they would see that I was by myself. So there was one time I needed to use the restroom and the lifeguard just said, "Don't worry about it. I got him." And, I was able to leave without having to pull him off the splash pad. So that was the crew there were just fantastic with that. They kind of saw that I was by myself, and a lot of them are the same staff that's in Adventure Ocean. So they knew him from the night before when we went, because we treated Nassau as a sea day. That was always the plan. He could not have gotten off at Nassau. You have to have a planned shore excursion to get off in Nassau if you are unvaccinated.
Okay.
But you can get off the ship, but you have to be on a planned shore excursion. But we had never planned to get off. We had planned to just stay on the ship.
Yeah, I mean, when it's a weekend cruise too, it's so much.
It's a different experience.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk, I guess.
Do you want to talk at the beginning as far as how we checked in? Yeah.
Yes. Let's start embarkation. What differences, if any, existed?
The first thing I can tell you is the port was empty. It was even my husband was like, "I can't believe how empty it was." We got there, I think at 1:40 was when we drove up and he dropped us off.
Did they have strict times for?
They had arrival times. Mine was 12:30 to 1. We got there at 1:40. So no, that wasn't that strict. But I think if you had gotten there earlier than your time, then they probably would have been pretty strict. But there was the ship was maybe, I want to say, 25 to 30% capacity. So there wasn't a need to be very strict because there was no line for anything. So we walked in. The first thing I did was obviously give the porter my suitcase. I was able to narrow it down to one suitcase, which was great, which is a lot for me, even though it's a 3-night cruise. The first thing you did was check in, and you showed your SeaPass card or your set sail pass, which was on your phone. Then you showed your vaccination card. So they took your vaccination. It was the very, very first thing you did. You showed your vaccination, your proof of vaccination. And then obviously yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because Florida has the state law that they can't ask. So I assume they didn't necessarily.
No, it's not that they can't. It's not that they can't ask.
They can't demand.
They can't demand.
Right.
So they can ask. They can't refuse entry based on your non-vaccination. So you can ask, you can provide it. So they asked if you had it. I showed it. They gave me a purple rubber wristband and I put that on. Then he obviously wasn't. So we immediately went to get him tested. Now we did get an email a couple of days before where I registered him with the lab that did the testing. So he was already registered. Some people forgot to do that and they didn't register for whatever reason. So it took a little extra step, but it was really fast. So I checked in, we did that. We walked over to the lab. They checked him in. I did a timestamp on the video so people could see how long it took. We were checking in for the test at 1:47. He was taking the test at 1:50. So by the time we dropped off, we got to got to the port and we're taking his test. It was 10 minutes. It was that fast. And then they did his nasal swab. It was not the brain tickler. It was just the nasal swab. And he did great. They were wonderful. They had stickers for all the kids. All I saw people getting tested were kids. There was quite a few. They had plenty of testing stations, but the only people I saw getting tested were kids.
So just to clarify, the policy then is if you are vaccinated, you don't need to be tested?
Correct.
But you could, in theory, not that I think anyone should, but you could, in theory, say you're vaccinated without showing your card.
No, they're going to treat you as unvaccinated if you do not show.
If you decide not to show your card, then you're treated as not. It says you're treated as unvaccinated.
Oh, okay, cool. So we're going to Aulani next month, and Hawaii is changing their policy to where you have to upload your vaccination card to their state website to be able to fly in without quarantining. So I've been wondering if it would be smoother for the cruise lines to just offer you an option to upload before you get there.
They just sent an email. Somebody I know is on August sailing, and they have now released a website. I don't know if you still need to bring your card with you.
Sure.
I just have mine in my passport, but they do have it where you can now. Yeah, you can put it up you can upload it to their system. So, but even if you're going, let's say you're going to Atlantis, you need to bring, what I heard is you have to bring your vaccination card. They will not let you inside Atlantis if you don't have proof of vaccination on you. That was one of the things I did here. So I would make sure you have it with you in your passport, but they do have that option now. Obviously we were the first cruise and they were learning everything as they went along, but he took the test. They said there's a big sign that says, look at the time, it'll be 40 minutes. So after that, you walked back outside and you kind of did like a U-turn. So you were ending up right where you started, but you ended up in a different line. And then now you went upstairs to check in. So before you checked in for your cruise, you did anything else, you did the testing. So that way, while you're going through security, while you're, checking in for the cruise, your test is being processed. So you're not wasting any time. So for me, I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was so well designed. It was so seamless. Because by the time we sat down after going through, and there was no line, by the time we got upstairs, went to the bathroom, half an hour had passed.
Right.
taking a 5.5-year-old to the potty. There was, going through security and everything. It only, we spent like 25, 30 minutes. So by the time I sat down, we only waited about 15 minutes more. And then email,
they call you, or how do you find out you passed the test?
You get an email. So they tell you to keep checking your email. I did. And I kept checking my junk too, but it went to my regular email. And it's one of the reasons why you're supposed to register before, to make sure that you're registered with your email, but it comes right to your email. And then once you get the notification you've passed, there's a little check-in desk with 2 people printing. They ask you your name. They will get your results. They'll print your results. And then you present those results when you're getting onto the ship.
Because I know our listeners are going to want to know the answer to this, do you know what would have happened if he tested positive?
So if he would have tested positive, my understanding is he would have gone into another room and been held there and taken another test.
And if that one was positive, you would have been denied entry.
Yes, he would have been denied. Now, because he is not eligible for the vaccine, he was not required to take a PCR test before. However, if you are, I think it's 12 and older now, and you are not vaccinated, you have to take a test and you have to present a negative test result within 72 hours. I went ahead and tested us both 3 days before. One, for my own peace of mind, because kids are even though I'm vaccinated, kids are usually asymptomatic, and he is in camp. So I decided for my own peace of mind, and then also to get him used to the test. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get him, he had never taken the coronavirus test before. So I wanted him, so he was not nervous. I said, remember, this is just going to be like the other day. It's going to tickle your nose. So he was calm, he was laughing, and he was the nurse was just, he was so good. And I said, well, we did a trial run a couple of days before, so he wasn't nervous. And plus it was also called My Nerves, because I mean, it wasn't a long wait for the results, but it's still nerve-wracking, because
the fear of, is my entire vacation about to get canceled?
Exactly.
Is really hard. And for folks who are flying,
exactly.
We actually have been thinking a lot about that with Hawaii, because we've all been vaccinated who are going on the trip, but it doesn't mean that you're 100% not going to test positive just because you've been vaccinated. And so we had been thinking, what happens if 3 days or 2 days before our Hawaii trip, we have to go get this test, because that was the rule. And one of us test positive, that would be so sad. So it is a bit of a relief now that they're saying, well, since you're vaccinated, you don't need to take those tests, because on the off chance that we would test positive and we weren't actually showing any symptoms and we weren't sick, we just had the virus. Obviously, we don't want to spread that to other folks, but we also don't want that to be the reason we don't get to travel at all. So I do think that it makes sense that, people will be moving in that direction.
Tests are so easily available, so it made sense. I just made an appointment for both of us 3 days before. We had those results the next day. Again, it was I thought it was a good plan of attack to go. And, interesting enough, the Nassau cruises, they do require everybody to get tested, even though it's a fully vaccinated cruise.
So that's what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about Atlantis and the rules there. A lot of people are like, the US should never have a vaccine passport, and like, we shouldn't require vaccines. And Florida wants to make these really intense laws about, like, you can't require vaccines to use any business out of Florida. That's all fine, except the ports that you go to are in other countries that can make whatever rules that they want to. And so it doesn't really matter if the governor of Florida or the CDC says it has to be this way. If a port is saying your people can't get off the ship unless this has happened, then that's something that you also have to take into consideration. So I think we're still in a place where the cruise industry is getting rules from the CDC and rules from other countries saying this is how it has to be. And these cruise industry, big, Royal Caribbean, Disney, Carnival, they're all just trying to figure out what policies are going to be able to make people feel the most safe, while also allowing a cruise to feel the most normal. And I think that's an interesting tightrope to walk.
It was interesting. I did a video on my YouTube channel about, hey, I'm going on to the first cruise. If you guys have questions. And I did, most everything was positive, but I did have a couple comments. They're requiring masks. I would never go on a cruise. And my response was, they're trying to get restarted. They're trying to get cruises restarted. Give them a break. They're trying to figure it out. I was fine. So we didn't know. When I booked, I kind of expected that I was vaccinated. I wouldn't have to wear a mask, but my son would. But I also planned on wearing a mask whenever he was required, because how am I going to explain to my 5.5-year-old that he has to wear a mask and mommy doesn't? So my plan was always to wear a mask when he had to. But then they released the rules that you had to wear a mask indoors whenever you were not actively eating or drinking, which is basically when you're indoors walking around. Because anytime we sat down, even if I was just kind of sitting down and I met a couple YouTubers and then Matt from Royal Caribbean Blog, we were sitting down at Playmakers and we had our masks off and there was no problem. You took your mask off when you were at the main dining room. You sat down, you took your mask off. But, the minute you got on the pool deck, there's a sign that says this is a mask-free zone. So we spent a lot of Saturday on the pool deck and, masks weren't required until we were walking back to our stateroom.
And that was for everybody, right?
That was for everybody. And I know some people were complaining, well, I'm vaccinated. Why do I have to? And I think it's for the crew members because they have to wear a mask all the time. They have pictures, They have buttons with their face, which is nice. So you know what they look like. But also, how are they going to monitor it? How are they going to monitor who's vaccinated, who's not, and then asking people to put on masks that aren't vaccinated? So I was fine with it. To be honest, I hate masks. So I'm going to just put it out there. I hate masks. I never wear a mask unless I'm required to do so. But I also don't complain about it when I'm required to do so. I went to Disney World, did it, but I don't wear one by choice. It didn't bother me. I think there was one time I left my stateroom to go run, drop off some pool towels. And I was like, oh crap, I forgot my mask. So I had to go back. But that was it. It was more of that inconvenience of forgetting it. It wasn't annoying. It was just kind of like, okay, had to do it. And I think back on the entire length of the cruise, I probably wore my mask maybe 30% of the time, 35% of the time, because you're on a cruise. You're outdoors a lot. At Coco Cay, you didn't have to wear it at all. It wasn't, I will say it wasn't even annoying because I'm so used to having to wear it at Disney World all the time because I haven't been there since the rules have changed. To me, this was nothing.
So let's stick with the COVID stuff for a couple more minutes, and then we're going to move on to like the fun. And I want to hear about Perfect Day, especially with your son and stuff like that. So before you came back to the United States or before the cruise was over, you had to take another COVID test, correct?
We were supposed to, but we never got a notification that he had to take a test. They were supposed to send something to our stateroom, and we weren't traveling. So I know if you're traveling out of Nassau, they require it to when you're traveling into the United States, but we never got a notification. So I don't know if we were supposed to, but they let them off the ship. And I know somebody sent me the new email that they just sent out, and they haven't changed that. They're still saying you need to take a test the last day of the cruise, but we never got a notice to take one. So okay. I don't know if we missed it, but yeah, I don't know. If we missed it, they still let us off.
Perfect.
If we had to take it, I do know it was an antigen test, which is also a nasal swab. So that was good too.
So overall, first cruise out of the United States, post shutdown, how normal did it feel to you?
It felt, I would say 95% normal. And that was, the mask was the only thing that felt different. That was really the only, and very, very little. There were some vaccinated areas and unvaccinated areas, but the vaccinated areas are the casino, the spa. Those are the areas my son isn't going to go to. The solarium. So that's not an issue. There were some vaccinated shows. So the shows, they have weird. They had, so basically that way everybody could take their mask off. Whereas if it was mixed, you had to keep your mask on because you weren't actively eating or drinking. They had like the ice show, some vaccinated shows, and then everyone are mixed. But again, it was the times that I think was a little done, not really thought out as a parent, because the times for the vaccinated only was at 7:15 and for everybody was at 9:30. So that seemed a little odd because kids were the most of the people that were unvaccinated. But I think, again, they're trying to figure it out. They did have like a 4:15 show the last day, but my son wanted to go to the kids club. So he's not a big show person anyway. Even on Disney, it took a lot for him to sit through a show. So he just wanted to go to the kids club.
How was the kids club?
It was amazing. So the kids club had different sessions, and they were from, the first night was just 7 to 10 and 10 to midnight. The 10 to midnight, you do have to pay $7 per hour if you choose to. So anything after 10, you do have to pay for, but other than that, it's free. The night session was 7 to 10. The day sessions for the other 2 days were 9 to 2, 2 to 5, and then 7 to 10. And you got to choose 4. They were maxing you out at 4. Now, the last day, I could have brought him in the afternoon if I wanted to and done a fifth session because there was capacity. But at the time when you checked in, you just basically picked 4. So what I did is I did 7 to 10 every night. And then the day of Nassau, he did 2 to 5 as well. So he went twice. He went 2 to 5, and then he did went to dinner with me, and then he did 7 to 10 every night.
Do they have themes in the kids club? Like, Disney's got so many IPs that the kids club's full of everything, but I don't know what Royal Caribbean, I guess, could buy the rights to certain IPs.
They don't. They used to have DreamWorks, but that contract ended. They had this huge story tale wall where it was interactive. And my son so they have the nursery, the Royal Tots or whatever it's called. And then it's the 3 to 5 area. Now my son is 5.5. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, he's going to be bored. I was like, he's not going to want to stay here. He's going to be bored. I couldn't drag him out. I mean, he didn't want to leave. The staff, and there was times where I wanted, actually every night, I was the last person to pick him up. I was picking him up at 9:59, 10 o'clock. And he was by himself at that point. All the other kids had been picked up. And the staff were there on the floor playing with him, and he was having a ball. Even if he were the only kid, the staff were doing activities. He came, every time he left there, he came with a craft. He came with something. There was one time he made a crown, and we actually even took professional photos with the crown. So
I have a question about the pictures. Were you allowed to take off your masks for family photos?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
so people that don't know, Shannon is Mrs. Florida.
Mrs. Universe. I'm actually Mrs. Universe, yes, until July 21st, which is when I give up my title.
And then you did other pageants. So you wear real crowns.
Yeah.
And then your son made you a crown and you wore it out in public. And I just think that's the best mother response. And then to be an actual crowned person that you're wearing your crown, I think that's just fantastic. It shows so much about you as a mom. So
well, thanks. It was fun.
That was really sweet. Let me just say really quick too, for our listeners, you can go, Shannon is putting vlogs up on her YouTube channel of each of the days. And then her Instagram account also shows a bunch of pictures of the different days. So it's really fun to follow along, and you guys can go and watch that there.
And I tried to record informational as a parent. I even filmed him taking his COVID test. I don't know if I was allowed to, but I did it anyway. So I wanted, because I had so many questions. So and this is anytime I travel or any vlogs that I do, I try and make it educational, as far as not hey, this is this new attraction, because there's so many other people doing that. So I try and do it from a parent's perspective as far as what the process is. I explained the hours of Splash Away Bay. So Splash Away Bay is the splash pad. It's not open all the time. It's actually open from 10:30 to 1, and then it closes, and then it's open from 4 to 6. So it's not open the whole time. And I didn't know that when I first went down. So I give that information. So I try and give information that other parents might find useful, not just here's my vacation, be jealous.
Yeah, which is still fantastic.
Yeah,
I was jealous. I was so jealous. I was like, oh, why didn't I sign up for that? And I will note that I looked for the Freedom for the rest of the summer, and
it's full.
It's full. So it's at least full if you have a child. So
it's full until September.
That's fantastic.
Because of the limited capacity.
Yeah. So like dining with the crew and just the service.
So the dining room is the traditional cruise dining. There's 3 levels. There's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th level. The 5th level is what Royal Caribbean calls my time dining, where you pick your own time. You could not be unvaccinated and do my time dining. So that was out. And I think that's just because they wanted to keep a vaccinated only area. So the vaccinated floor was the 3rd floor for traditional dining. And then the 4th level was the mixed. And it was pretty empty. And you saw that most of the people there were families. Now we did go to the first seating, which was at 6:00. It says 5:15 on the website, but it was 6:00, which was perfect for us. We were spaced out. So very, very similar to Walt Disney World, where all the tables are spaced out. And that was the same thing at the Windjammer, which is, I guess, equivalent to Cabanas on Disney Cruise Line. It's their buffet. And the buffet was a buffet, except you didn't serve yourself. You were served, which I have to say, I liked so much better. And it was so much more efficient because people didn't linger.
Right.
And that's always my frustration with the buffets is people linger. But when people are serving you, nobody was lingering. And I've heard other people make that same observation. So I kind of hope they keep it that way. You did have to make a reservation, but we never had a problem getting a reservation. It's just basically you go on the app and you say, I'm coming in 15 minutes. As soon as we were ready to go, I'd get on the app, make a reservation. But they didn't even ask you for your reservation. So that was never an issue. They do scan you in and out of the buffet. And that way they can keep capacity. So they know the capacity. But I never saw anybody turned away. And the same thing with the tables, as the tables were spaced out. Kind of like same thing at Disney World, where you can grab a table that's not, some of them are saying you can't sit here. This table is not open. So the same type of thing. But again, never had a problem finding a table. It was fantastic.
So let's talk about Royal Caribbean's Perfect Day at Coco Cay. They completely redid their private island like a year before
it opened in May.
Shutdown.
Yeah, it opened in May 2019 because we were on a cruise Memorial weekend. That was when we went on the Symphony, and we weren't supposed to stop there. And then a week before our cruise, they added it into the itinerary because it got finished early. We were able to go there back in May 2019.
And we had Nick that was on our show a couple of weeks ago who had cruised on the Adventure out of Nassau. So he had already described it a little bit. He has indicated that there's an additional paid for area, and then there's the included area.
Right.
So which part did you participate in?
I'm a cheap person, so we went to the free area. Now the Thrill Water Park is my son's. I'm not a Thrill Water Park type of person. That's maybe when we go in March with my husband, they'll do that, but that's an additional fee. Then there's the Cocoa Beach Club, which is also an additional fee, which is the private area. Everything else is free. It's like Castaway Cay. We only did the free area. There's a Splashaway Bay on the island, which is incredible. We were there for a good 2 hours. And I mean, I had to pull my son away so that we could go eat. I was like, you need to eat. And I was just trying to get him away. He just didn't want to get off. There's 3 different types of slides. There's a little pool where they land in, and then there's like this whole obstacle course that's like a splash pad. It's just incredible. Again, I have videos. I actually did a live stream from there. So I have a good 7 minutes of that area. And then after we ate, there's a grill, kind of the same thing. Hot dogs, hamburgers, barbecue chicken. They had a taco station, fajita station as well that you eat. And then there's a little beach called Harbor Beach, and it's right at the front, and it's almost like a bay. We went there. There's no waves because it's kind of a bay, so it's just water. It's just the seawater. And my son played there. We were there for another hour and a half, and plenty of chairs. And he had a ball. He met some other kids. They were building a sandcastle. We stayed there until we decided to leave. And then he was just like, I was like, okay, it was about 2:30 and we got to the island at 10, and we got on the island at 10. So I was like, okay, we're both pretty pale. So I was reapplying, but it was starting to get hot. And I literally had to drag him off the island. I mean, he didn't want to leave. He did not want to leave.
So just to compare it to, because I feel like all the cruise lines right now are fighting over supremacy of their islands. So just to compare it to Castaway Cay, what do you think of Coco Cay?
I know this is going to probably put me on the bad list for some of your listeners, but I think Coco Cay trumps Castaway Cay. The reason is the activities for the kids. The splash pad for me is enough. And then also, I'm not a beach person. I don't like sand in places there shouldn't be sand. And I can enjoy this. I can enjoy the sand. And we got a cabana. So the last time we went, we had a cabana, which was amazing. But I'm more of a pool person, and they have this Oasis Lagoon that's it has a swim up bar. It's a 0 entry. We didn't do it this time, but that's what we did last time, and we had a ball. And the kids are welcome there. There's a swim up bar. It's just amazing. So there's a lot of options, but having that beach there, but the splash pad for me, the Splashaway Bay, is so critical for the age that my son is. Now, when my son's older, maybe it won't make a difference. The one thing I do say that Castaway Cay has that Coco Cay doesn't is the kids club on the island. And we utilized that the last time so that we could run the 5K. And I think that is something that I would love to see Royal Caribbean do, though I don't think they will. I think that is something as a parent, it allows you a little bit of a break. And there's plenty of things to do in the kids club for that age. But outside of the kids club, it's pretty much just a beach. There's that activity, but it's inside the water in the ocean. And my son's too little for that. That's too hard for him to use. So maybe when he's older, then it would change. I think it also depends on the age of your child.
Yeah, I think Royal Caribbean hit it out of the park with their private island, especially because yes, there is stuff that's an additional charge, but Disney has items you can book that's an additional charge as well. But they really did think things through. And I think having, a splash pad, and it's just a great day that is, off the ship, but included in your cruise fare. I do think that they kind of hit that private island out of the park.
And if you ask my son, we asked him what was his favorite thing, he goes, the island. That's what he said, it's the island. I said, what was the favorite thing on the island? He goes, everything. So, and that's not what he said about our Disney cruise. So Disney cruise was, meeting Spider-Man. It's a different experience. I love Castaway Cay, and I don't think, but which one would I prefer? I would take Coco Cay any day.
So I have a question. I have one sort of maybe difference between Disney and Royal kind of question. Disney, when I was on Royal last, I think it was 2015, I was actually on the Freedom. We stopped at Coco Cay when it was just
nothing,
regular tender island. We were sitting on the beach and the people all around us were smoking cigarettes, at their beach chair. And the one thing about Disney that I think is so fantastic is they might be at a beach, but you have to be in a designated smoking area to be able to smoke on the island. Do you have any recollection of how it is now at the private island?
I remember that because I'd been to Coco Cay a couple times before. And I remember that thinking back, I did see a designated smoking section. I never saw anybody smoking around us. Now, obviously, it was limited capacity. But even thinking back to 2 years ago, I don't remember seeing anybody smoking. So I think that probably since the renovations, I would probably say they're more strict about smoking because of all the renovations. Yeah. But I can't say with certainty.
Which that to me, totally, for my whole family, it's so dampened the day because the people all around us, and we had gotten a cabana on that particular trip and wanted to be able to lay on the beach in front of our cabana. And you couldn't because it was just, you were inundated by the smoke smell. And so, that's a big,
it was a big, no, I can see that, but I would say, I don't know for sure. I know they're very, very strict on the ship. They're very strict on the ship. So, but I don't know, but I never saw anybody smoking in any of the areas.
Okay.
But they do have a casino on the ship, right?
They do have a casino on the ship, and the casino was a vaccinated area, so you could walk around the casino without a mask. So that was nice. I did gamble twice, and I was doing good the first night, and then the last night of the cruise, I decided to go back, which was stupid, and lost all the money that I had won. So.
Oh no!
Yeah, but you got 2 nights of entertainment out of it. So
you know what? Yeah, that's how I kind of see it. I take $100 to bet. That's what I did. So it was just $100, and that was my shore excursion or cruise excursion. But we're not big gamblers, but we do enjoy a casino. That was fun.
And not something you can do on Disney. So
exactly.
Do it where you can. So what I'm hearing is it was a lot of fun, and COVID didn't put a big damper on it, even though there were some things that COVID made that were slightly different, the testing and the mask wearing
right.
and things like that. But it didn't feel like a reason for you to not vacation.
We always took the mentality of we're not going to let this stop our lives. We're healthy. We're going to keep living our lives. So we've always had that mentality. And when this cruise was released, I was like, I want to be on the first ship. I want to be on the first ship. I want to be a part of this. And I'm so glad I did. I kept, and I was nervous. I will say about a day before, I remember telling my husband, I'm like, I've never traveled with him by myself. I'm really nervous because I don't have backup. And I'm thankful I'm not a single parent because it was work, but it was a great time. And at one point, my son said to me, he goes, Mommy, I hope you always remember this trip. And I just that was worth every penny of this trip. It was great. It was a wonderful time. And I was really surprised how normal it felt. Like I kept thinking, it just feels so normal. And I remember thinking before, if they have this mask rule in March, when we have our trip planned on the Odyssey, I don't know if we'll go. And now that I've experienced it, we would absolutely not. We would never cancel, because if the mask rule was still around in March of 2022, we would still go. It was such a non-factor in it. And this is coming from someone who does not like masks. It was such a non-factor that it would not hinder me from going on another cruise.
Right.
That's good to know. It's great knowledge for our listeners out there.
Yeah. Well, I guess as we sort of move towards wrapping up for today, is there anything else that you would want our listeners to know about coming back to cruising, or sort of what your experiences have been like that might benefit them?
No, it's going to be different, but it's still going to be great. The crew members were so thankful. And I think this is going to go across every single line, no matter, Carnival, Princess, Disney, Royal Caribbean, it's all going to be the same. They're so thankful to be back. You could tell. I mean, when we walked into dinner the first night, they applauded us. The waiter came over. He goes, "You guys are my first guests." Aww. And he had tears in his eyes. And I started crying. I mean, he was so thankful. He's like, "We are so thankful you're back." And that was what we continually got the whole time. They're just so thankful. And I mean, even to the porter, when I left the ship was thankful, because they haven't worked in 15 months. So it is different, but it's more normal than not. And it's still wonderful. I think go in with an open mind with kids that are unvaccinated, or if you choose to be unvaccinated yourself. I'm one that is like personal choice. If you choose not to get vaccinated, that's completely fine. I have no problem with that. Just know that there's going to be areas that you can't go in, and accept that. And if that doesn't work for you, then wait till the restrictions ease up. But, I never complained. Like a tradition I always do is I always do the spa raffle. I have pretty good luck, but I couldn't attend because my son wasn't vaccinated. And the area that they were having the spa raffle was a vaccinated only area. So okay, it is what it is. I was disappointed, but did it ruin my trip? No, it was just, okay, that's the rules, move on. And so I think those are the types of things you just kind of have to go with the flow. And if you have that mentality, you're going to have an amazing time.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, I love that too. I think that's really a great place to end it on, because I think you're right. A big part of enjoying a vacation is your own mindset going into it. And I think, things are different but different isn't necessarily bad.
Right, exactly.
And we're wanting this industry to come back. And so in order for it to come back successfully, it takes some caution because you don't want to start without being cautious, and then the whole industry gets shut down all over.
Exactly.
The alternative is no industry. The alternative is no cruising. And so if you choose to not cruise right now, that is an option that you can take. So, and then if you choose to cruise, look at this fabulous time that you had and these beautiful memories that you made with your son. So Shannon, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Please tell our listeners where everybody can find you.
So you can find me on YouTube, just basically youtube.com/Shannon Ford. And then I'm also on Instagram. I am on Twitter a little bit. I'm not as active on Twitter, at Mrs. Shannon Ford, just all together. And then you can also, I forgot to mention this earlier, I'm also co-host of DVC Newscast. We cover mainly DVC news, but also a little Disney news and, any Disney news that would be relevant to a DVC owner. So I am a co-host of that. So you can find us on all the Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find a podcast is where you can find us.
Awesome. Well, we encourage you to go follow Shannon and take all those helpful tips. And in the meantime, I hope all of our listeners have a great sort of inspiration after listening to this to start planning their next cruise and getting back to something that meant a lot to a lot of us before this pandemic.
Absolutely.
So thanks for coming on today. And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's going to wrap up the show today. Once again, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, we really want to thank Shannon for coming on and sharing her experiences as she sailed with her son on the beautiful Freedom of the Seas, Royal Caribbean's first sailing out of the United States since cruising started back up here. And it was good to hear from her say basically the same thing that Nick said from our previous episode 211, when he sailed on Adventure of the Seas out of Nassau, that even with the changes, 95% of the cruising experience feels very familiar and the same as it was before. And both are excited to get back on board the ship. So as the Disney Magic begins sailing here in just a couple of weeks over in the UK, we will look to see how that experience is. We've got a couple of people lined up to bring those experiences with you as well. So look for more trip reports to come as sailing begins again. And as this episode comes out, we're excited to announce that Shannon and her family was one of the first 5 families who were selected by Disney Cruise Line to their Year of Wishes sweepstakes. So she's going to be sailing on the Disney Wish on a pre-inaugural sailing. So before that first inaugural sailing that sold out right away, she and her family are going to be on board that. And there's still opportunities for you and your family to win. You can go to yearofwishes.com and you can find out all the information there. Also, make sure that you're following Shannon over at her YouTube channel. She's got some amazing videos from the DVC world and just tons of Disney Cruise Line videos as well. But she'll be putting up all the information from her and her family as they, start planning that sailing and actually, go on that sailing as well. Go over to youtube.com/Shannon Ford. Also, she is one of the main contributors to My DVC Points DVC Newscast. You can catch her every week. She and Pete and Josh do just an amazing job over there. That's one of my go-to podcasts to listen to each and every week to kind of keep you up on the DVC world. And they also cover, kind of happenings around Walt Disney World, and they touch on Disney Cruise Line sometimes as well. So you'll be able to listen to her over there and find out more information as she gets ready for that just magical sailing aboard the Disney Wish. Well, if you'll be going on a sailing sometime soon and would like to come on our show and share your experiences, you can reach out to me, Steve, at DCLpodcast.com. Be sure to appreciate each and every one of you who take the time to do that. That helps all of us cruise a little smarter, as we like to say, and also just everybody gets to find out what that experience is like as the cruising industry begins again. So thank you for each and every one of you who've reached out so far. And like I said, if you'd like to come on, just send me an email and we will find a time to get you on board to talk about your cruising experience. Well, between now and our next show, if you are heading out on a vacation, a staycation, or just spending time with your family, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, I'm going to wish you to just be well, enjoy the time you have with each other, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.